All right, back at it with Iowa State this week. A team that has played fairly well. They ran into a little bit of a buzzsaw last week with Baylor's offense, which has been common for most teams that have played them over the last few years, but have gotten a little better. Their quarterback has been a key player for them. He's obviously their leading passer, but he also has double the rush yards as anybody else on their team, so he makes them go on offense. Defensively, very similar to what they've done in the past. So for us, it's improvement each week. We have to continue to work in the same areas that we've talked about for a number of weeks here. We still need to there's a lot of room for improvement in the running game. Continue to throw the ball vertically down the field. Defensively, try to bring some players along and develop some more depth. Continue to work on our coverage units on special teams. So we have a lot of work ahead of us. And, each week's exciting for us, and I'm sure the games that we play from this point on will be exciting each Saturday.
Coach Gundy, talk a little bit about Jimmy Bean. I watched the game and thought he's playing well, but he had a great game.
Yeah, he's played pretty well. He's continued to develop. He's an example of a player that we brought in that was somewhat undersized, has been developed in our weight room, understands the program's work ethic, his attitude's really good, has developed his body, and has got a chance to play the game, maybe beyond college. So he's been a good player for us.
Talk about the defense overall. I mean, I think people may be a little surprised at how well they're playing with all the new guys in there. You have injuries, put a new guy in, and still getting the job done.
I think there's areas we're certainly vulnerable, but for what we're working with the inexperience, I'm pleased with the output. There's some tackles that we missed. Again, when you play Tech, I think if you watch them throughout the year, you'll see where they can create some matchup issues with their players, and you will miss some tackles, but those are certainly areas we need to improve. But I think they're doing a good job with the staff. We just need to bring some young players along as fast as possible to create some depth.
Mike Desroland said that he felt like the offensive line played a lot better against Tech. Now that you've seen some film, I mean, did you see an improvement from the group?
I would say that's a stretch. Des is probably being nice. They're playing okay. We're getting some a little bit of push out of them, but we have a long ways to go in order to be able to run the ball effectively in this league.
Do to get them better? How does an offensive line get better?
It just needs experience.
It comes in games. Do they get better during the week? I mean, do they work on things that they didn't do on Saturday or whatever?
A little bit, but it's just the adjustments in the game and the strength. And when you have young players, physically they're not as strong as the mature players, and it just takes them a little time to bring them along. And there's not really any recipe for getting them a lot better in 1 week that I know of, but they are improving, yes.
The fact that they have a new position coach, and I mean, that plays a small factor in it, or is that an old thing now?
Really doesn't play a factor at all. Bob's done a good job with them. The youth that we have at those three positions, really those four positions. Grisby's a veteran player, but he doesn't have hardly any starts. So you're looking at really 4 out of the 5 positions of guys that hadn't played college football.
You always want to run the football better. Every coach does. Is 4.1 enough, or is that not where you want to be?
It's not good enough. No, you got to be over 5 in most cases. And last week we didn't really have an opportunity to run the football with the way they played defense, and they have the choice to determine that. If they're going to play coverage and then can stop us with equal numbers in the box, then now we're in a whole different situation. But Tech's perspective was to stop the run with safeties, which really didn't give us any numbers throughout the evening.
Strong presumption out there that you guys should have stacked up more rushing yards against Tech, like everybody else did, Arkansas and everybody. Can you kind of describe how that doesn't always work that way, whether it's how they're aligning defensively, extra safety coming down, or whatever?
Well, Arkansas plays with 2 tight ends and a fullback, so you can put as many in the box as you want against them. From what I saw on tape, they're going to have equal numbers. UTEP is in a similar situation with the way they run the football. we don't have that style of offense here, and so Texas Tech safety played in down there at linebacker depth most of the night, and you're not going to have as many rushing yards as what you would if they would have played in a normal safety position.
You guys went a little bigger in the second half a few times?
At times, yes. We finally got a little bit of a lead. Defense was playing well, and so we were in a little bit different mode offensively than what we were when we started the game.
Weather in the Big 12 is unpredictable as October and November gets here. You got to want to be able to run the football more consistently than what you did in September.
You know, teams throw the ball fairly well in weather. The wind can be a little bit of an issue in October in this part of the country. We don't really have as much of an issue with obviously with snow. Last year, you know, we had 2 cold games and didn't really affect us throwing the ball. I don't think it affected anybody. Prior to that, we didn't really have very many cold football games in this conference. So the wind can be a little bit more of an issue than what the weather can be at times.
Thanks.
Mike, did you get an update on Ashton's status?
I hope he's practicing on Tuesday.
Mike, is what we've seen in the last 2 games in the passing game with the Dax, is that kind of the offense that you know everybody should expect to see, you know, as far as the vertical passing game, where I think half of his completions this past week went for 30 yards or more?
Well, he throws a fairly deep or a fairly accurate deep ball, and so we need to take advantage of that. We have a number of passes that don't fall in that category, but the style of play that Tech gave us allowed us an opportunity to throw the ball down the field. It won't be that way each week. There'll be other teams like, in my opinion, Iowa State will play more conventional, and there'll be more intermediate passes involved.
Looks like the tight end is back, Mike.
Somewhat. Not as much as what I would like, but we're working them in. Seaton does a good job at playing some tight end for us, and then obviously Jarwin's coming along. He's still a young player. But I think there's a place for a tight end in this league right now with the defenses that we're facing.
You say not as much as you'd like. What do you mean by that?
Well, I'd like to play with the tight end more than what we are, but as we develop Jarwin, he's a young football player. There's a certain number of plays that we're comfortable with him being in the game, and then beyond that, it may be a little bit of a reach to put him out there instead of a Brandon Shepard. And but he's coming along and making some plays.
An area you might also explore more in recruiting, if you want to.
I think so. At times, at that position, your wide receiver, your tight end, your fullbacks, there's the best on the board available. What we can get our hands on at times is what we'll take.
We'll talk about Marcel Aitman and how he's kind of stepped up the last couple of games, had a bigger role.
He's practiced much better over the last 2 or 3 weeks. He played well for us early in the season a year ago, and then later in the year, his practice habits were very average. Average practice habits mean you play average in games. He started out the season good, then he went through a lull for a few weeks, and in the last couple weeks he's practiced really well, and you see the results. He's definitely a big body. He's got strong hands. He's experienced and should make plays for us.
You notice Mark Mancino's presence at Iowa State? Is that something that you
Same style of offense. Yeah, he's a very good coach, smart, and the schemes he's used now are essentially the same ones, in my opinion, from watching him, as what he was using at Kansas years ago.
Mike, how do you feel like Tyreek Hill has held up durability-wise, going from JUCO to this level? Has the physicality kind of been a drain on him at times, you think?
I'm not so much so sure it's that as it is with everything that we're asking him to do. It could be draining him as much as anything, and so we've really looked at where he's at and his practice reps and trying to keep him fresh. But to answer your question, he's done very well. You know, early in the season I had concerns. I've always had concerns about legitimate track guys playing football, and he's handled himself really well in that manner.
Do you feel more comfortable with your young cornerbacks out on the field now than you did a week ago before, you know, they had to be thrown out there Thursday night?
Not really. They're doing good. We're getting something out of them, but I'm not ever really comfortable with young defensive backs in the game.
Mike, talk about Ramon, if you would, a little bit. A guy that was really a versatile, high school player. Did you always see him as a corner, or did that change
High
as a
school
guy?
quarterback, really. Not only is he a freshman playing in this league, but he was playing on offense last year in high school. And we saw him as like the Justin Gilbert athleticism, that type of player. We weren't expecting him to have to play as much as he is this season. And he's very bright. His work habits are great. He's yes sir, no sir. He's really the type of player that we're looking for, type of person we're looking for. And he's going to have to develop much quicker than what we wanted him to, just based on even being a third corner. When Lampkin is in the game, he's the next guy that goes. And he should develop into being a really good player here. Be considerably different at this time next year.
You say you didn't want to use him as much as you have, but he must have played his way into the role of being that third corner, right?
Well, Ofrey plays, and he plays, and they're both true freshmen, so one of them's by default. Is the next guy in. They've both done very well, but for a coach, you would like to have some experience at your backup, and it just worked out that this season we don't have that luxury. So those guys are pressed into it, and we're trying to protect them so they don't run into a wall in the middle of October, get really fatigued and struggle mentally, and it shows up in a game, but they're holding up okay at this time.
Mike, we saw Dax with the design run for the touchdown there. Do you think he's an underrated as a little bit of a scrambler, and what does he bring with that aspect?
Not really. He's not very good. There was nobody out there, and he ran in the end zone.
Hitches on a couple of slides, too. You want to see him get down, right?
It's interesting that we've had discussions with him, at the end of the game, that, we felt we had a good play to keep the ball and get a first down and slide. And sometimes those guys continue to take hits. And, I joke with him a little bit, being maybe a little facetious, but he was effective in his run when he scored, and he was effective on a couple scrambles. But it's not something we want to see him do a lot. And he's not going to take off and cut back across the field and gain 20, 25 yards. That's not what I don't think he's that type of player. But he does need to learn to avoid contact if it's not in a position to get a first down or score a touchdown.
This isn't like a Clint Shelf situation where we all just underestimated Clint.
I tried to warn you guys. You didn't buy into it. I told you Clint was a really good runner. I hope Dax turns out that way. I don't know that he's on that path at this time. Dax's strengths seem to be his ability to understand our offense. He was much better in this last game, and he has an ability to throw the ball accurately down the field. And in intermediate passes, the same. Once he relaxes his feet and kind of sits in there, he throws it pretty well. But I do think that he will be nifty enough to scramble sometimes for 4, 5, 6 yards, and we'll have plays where he does keep the ball.
Do you feel like Al Davis or John Madden at times, the way you guys are just heaving it down the field, old Oakland Raiders stuff?
Their old theory was to run it and then throw it deep, but they only threw it deep like 4 times a game. He's on pace to throw it deep more than anybody in the history of this league. Maybe in anybody that's ever played college football. But I think as we move through the league, you'll see more conventional defenses that will defend the deep ball and force us to be a better intermediate passing team.
He's good in the pocket, though, isn't he?
He's doing really well.
Step out, slide outside, and make a play that way.
He's doing well in the pocket. There's times he tripped over his own feet one time and threw the ball on the ground. But for the most part, we're very critical of him, of course, myself and others at his position. But if you take the number of attempts he's had and times them, and there's a formula you go based on his protection and the time he had to go through his reads, he's been fairly productive.
Wouldn't you think that's the hardest part for a guy that hasn't played in 5 years, is pocket presence and that little X
That would
factor?
be up there, sure. And just the speed of the game, where everything happens a lot faster. I mean, he had some – I'm sure he had some redshirt plays when he was at Arizona, and then he's scrimmaged here. But other than that, he's been competing against high school players that certainly don't have the overall team speed as what he's going to see in this league.
The fact that you can really throw it deep. I'm guessing it helps that you have physical receivers that can go get a ball.
Yeah, Casey Dunn and Jason Ray, particular Casey's been here a number of years now, has tried to recruit size and strength on the perimeter. And then we've always looked for guys on the inside that could play like Josh Stewart. And he's been here a number of years now and has proven to be a good evaluator of talent. And he's bringing guys in, for example, like James Washington, that was not very highly recruited. He liked him from day one, offered him right away, saw him as an outside guy that was a leaper that could go up and get the ball. So we have some guys that match up with Dax's ability at this time.
Could you talk more about your receivers and what you think they can do better on Saturday's game?
Well, we still drop too many passes. You know, we have to cut down on our drops. Some of the balls that they're dropping are thrown way down the field. And balls that are thrown further down the field have less chance of being completed, either because of the throw or because of the catch, because the ball travels farther. That's why the West Coast offense was invented years ago, is because it was short, easy throws, easy to complete, easy to catch. But we're still dropping too many of them that are thrown down the field. I think there was 3 that he threw the other day that we should have caught, in just a matter of actually just seeing the ball into your fingertips. Aitman looked up, saw a touchdown, and looked up at the last second. And that's usually what happens with the young players. They're blocking well, which is important to us, our staff, and myself personally, that our wide receivers are really physical blockers. And I think they understand that if they block well, then we run better. If we run better, they get more passes. So it kind of works both ways.
Mike, you had Jake Spavital in here, I think, in 2010 as a grad assistant. I don't know how close you worked with him, but was there anything you saw back then that made you think he's going to be a guy who's going to rise in this profession?
Well, he's come through this tree of coaches and goes all the way back to it goes way back, and then up through Leach and Dana, and then come through here, and he was been with Dana for a few years and has kind of learned that system and has always been very bright, and obviously he's doing very well, and a lot of the same philosophies and thoughts that they had that we had here, I'm sure he's using down there. And Coach Sumlin was used to it because Dana was with him before that at Houston. And so it's all kind of the same tree and the same thought process of offensive football and quarterback play.
Coach and offensive coordinator, what makes a good GA?
Oh, well, it's really no different than being a coach. I mean, some guys have an ability to see things and coach it and teach it and find where a defense could be vulnerable, and some guys can coach forever and they really never figure it out. It's no different than any other profession. Some guys are better mechanics than others. They can think differently and think quick. Coaches that call plays have to be able to think really fast, in my opinion, to be successful.
Do you like morning games?
I like morning games. I'd rather kick off at 2 o'clock. 2 o'clock's my choice, but morning games are okay. I know the marketing and the administration, and a lot of times it's not an easy situation for the fans to get here, but I think that a morning game on a Saturday is still much more feasible than a Thursday night game during the season for us because of the location. You're 50 minutes from Oklahoma City, an hour from Tulsa, and when you have children, school nights, things like that, it's much more difficult. I think the 11 o'clock game gives them a better chance and much more useful to us as a university than the during the week games.
That's good.
Good. All right.